thumbnail, Sargon won. So I'm invested here.
Yeah. All right. And you PSA?
I think, I mean, I don't think Sargon did great, but I don't think Spencer, I think Spencer came off like he did better, but I don't think he actually did better intellectually. I don't think he addressed Sargon's main point, which is, can you define what whiteness is? And Spencer's just kind of vacillating between, well, we just kind of know what whiteness is, which to me is not an acceptable answer.
I think that's the left's weakest argument too, to be honest with you. The what is whiteness argument.
You think that's the what?
I think it's the weakest argument. I think it's,
yeah, I'm not. I think there are better arguments, but I still think that's an argument that needs to be addressed, and it never was.
Yeah, I disagree with that. That it wasn't addressed. I think that, and I don't think he just said. I mean, first of all, there was people. I think it would have been better if it was just Richard and Sargon. I don't think that. I think that the problem that Richard was having is that Styx was in there too, and Styx was making an entirely different type of argument against Richard, and then Sargon was sort of doing this kind of deconstructionist, kind of like Socratic, line of questioning, trying to lead him to a conclusion or trying to tease out like a principle or something like that, and Styx was just like presenting kind of like wild scenarios, like what do you do about this, what do you do about this, and it's hard to kind of go back and forth between the two things, and then there was emotions were running high, etc. I think the what is white, I think he did address that. I think Richard won, and he won on a number of levels, other than I think intellectually he made better points, better arguments, and I think he presented himself better, like he showed his face. He was well dressed. So in terms of the presentation propaganda aspect, I think he looked better. And also lobbing those insults might be underhanded, it might be cheap. It's a tactic that is kind of a rallying tactic, right? Like and then your people are like, yeah, but it's also going to piss the enemy off a lot, right? Or the opposition. It's going to piss them off a lot. So you might not win anybody over when you do that, but you'll certainly rally your own people. I think the what is white, I think that is I think honestly, the people that do that now kind of, it seems to me to be a stalling tactic, a delaying tactic. Like my question to you, I guess, would be this, do you think that question has ever been answered satisfactorily?
I don't know. I don't consume a significant amount of alt-right content to clarify that. So okay. I just, based on the stream, I didn't think so.
Okay. So you don't think that the idea of the core of people that in other words, I thought Sargon's method of attacking the concept was to say, here are fringe outliers that are it's not clear if they fit into your definition or not. Right. So it's there's a core view, and you could say and everyone kind of gets that. I'm white, people of European descent are white, and then is an Armenian white? Is a Turk white? You know what I mean? People, that's kind of the method that people go at it, and I'm sort of well, if there's a fuzzy edge around, it's a biological thing, so it's it's not necessarily totally perfectly well defined around the edges, but at the center it's quite clear. We know what a white person is, and there's multiple governments that consider white to be a classification. The United States government has long operated on a definition of white people that was quite obvious to them. So I think that sort of you can always also nitpick with that. You can always find something wrong with it, or an example that's it's not clear. Right. It's what I don't know. Is that Iranian person? Are they white or not? I don't know.
Well, I think the physical part of it was only the physical aspect of what is physically a white person was only a part of it, because the other aspect was what is the characteristic of being white that makes it important to have a nation be built upon that. And that I thought was the more important issue that wasn't addressed, of what that meant.
And I that is a more important issue, I think. And I think that Spencer would be happy to address that. I think if it was less maybe a hectic thing, he probably would have gotten around to it. I think that that's kind of a tough question. It's sort of it's like we know we know the sort of physical characteristic of it, and then there's like, well, why do you value white? I guess that's sort of what you're getting at.
Yeah, that's the question.
Okay, I would say first of all, I value white because, well, one, I am white. There's a rich cultural heritage of people that are white. There's a architecture, art, music, philosophy, etc. that goes, I think, significantly beyond the achievements of other cultures. I think the East Asians are come close in some respects, but they're not quite there. It's sort of a genetic and cultural family, linguistic family, and there's also, I think, a long history. There's a lot of evidence that other whites and humans generally just prefer their in-group. And there's a long history of the behavior of white people in the United States, and also just the way that many states were formed in Europe around, and that's even a category below whiteness, which are, below like ethnicity, right? So Europe used to be ethno-states, literally not like white states, but ethno-states. The United States is a little bit different because it's multiple white ethnicities. But I think that it's just obvious that this is a value that people have. And I think what the alt-right is saying is not necessarily that doesn't necessarily need to be justified. It's simply an obvious way that people are. Like, we see white people, given the choice, prefer white people. And much of what the government does is remove that choice from them with legislation and things like that.
When you talk about people prefer their in-groups, that's just true of all humanity. I don't think that has anything to do with skin color. Everyone prefers. However,
white is more than skin color, though. Would you agree?
I don't know if I wouldn't agree with that. The broad term white is more than skin color. I would agree that specific ethnicities regarding, cultures that exist in specific areas, but being white, I would not agree with that.
Okay, I disagree with that. How would you do you think a white American is in any way distinct from a black American significantly on grounds of biology, culture, whatever?
No, I couldn't make that distinction based on just that information. I think you have to look at them as individuals.
Yeah,
but that's not. Sure, you look at everyone as individuals, though. That's not really an argument against the idea that these two individuals can be in different categories.
People break down along culture, though, more than they do along race.
Well, but I think those two things are linked inextricably.
But not necessarily. Then you're saying that the goths and the jocks are both in the same culture just because they're white, and they are very different cultures.
Those are like subcultures.
Okay.
But how are you making the distinction between what's a culture and what's a subculture?
Hey, beautiful people.
What's so you're saying, like, is goth an ethnicity though? It's like a way of like, okay, so how do you distinguish between
the only reason that I brought up,
I feel like when we get into these kind of categorization arguments, it becomes like, this is why Spencer became frustrated, frankly. I get frustrated with this. I think that this is stuff that is like actually not something that maybe has clear, obvious, like hard definitions, and then that is used to attack the concept as a whole. And I just think that that's like kind of a sort of metaphysically, philosophically cheap way of arguing.
I don't mean to frustrate you. The only reason I brought up the goths and the jocks things is because even you said you read Jonathan Haidt's book where he talks about group selection and how humans are just our brain software organizes us into groups. That's just our psychology. And you have different tribes, like you had the Hutus and the Tutsis in a genocide with one another. That's how much they hated each other, and they're both the same ethnicity. Like people.
Well, no, they're not. They're the same race.
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
They're different. Different ethnicities. The same race.
Different ethnicities. So you're trying to form an ethnicity around white.
I don't think I'm trying to form. What I'm saying is that, now this is my thing. Maybe other people don't agree with me. First of all, white is a race. Right, white is a racial category of human being. Okay,
yeah. I have no problem with any of that.
Okay, in the United States, which restricted naturalization to be a citizen for many years, and there's a long history of U.S. immigration history. Essentially, the white requirement to be white was broken down in 1965.
Mm-hmm.
White people of different European ethnicities came to the United States, mixed together, and created a different ethnicity. And there's no better word for this than white. Like, what am I? Do I have just no ethnic group? Because I'm not Serbian and I'm not Norwegian. Those are my European ancestries.
You're American.
I'm neither of those.
American.
Okay, I'm an American. I'm an American, but I'm also different than an American that's black.
Well, an American that's black could easily be an American too. I mean, that's a
Fine.
cultural thing.
Okay, fine. There's a super category of nationality.
Yeah.
And then white is a subcategory of the nationality American that represents a certain kind of American, of which I am a group. That is a distinct group. That is a definable group.
Right, but the question that I had earlier is, why is that an important group? Why is the skin color an important distinction?
I don't know. Ask the people that write equal opportunity housing legislation. Ask the people that write affirmative action rules at colleges. Ask the people that insist that I mean, why is it important? Look at history, man. I mean, you say why is it important to me? I'm saying, like, this is a thing that has been important.
Well,
There's
but
a huge number of
if it's not
variables.
important, can we get rid of all the equal housing, all that legislation?
I'm down with that. Sure.
Yeah, I think
when that happens, and people naturally select themselves into racial groups, are you going to just go around like deconstructing these choices that
some will. The people
of
that
course, but it's like,
yeah.
I just feel like, again, this is what I start to call tactical nihilism. Like, you could honestly do this to me all night. You could keep going like this all night, breaking down, like asking for a more specific definition. What do you mean by this?
Let's not. I agree.
Well, wait a minute.
I agree with you, Mike. Let's not.
Wait a minute. Isn't it? I don't know you, Mike. So I don't know exactly what your positions on anything is. But if anyone is advocating for a nation to be built around a specific group of people, isn't it fair to ask for clarification and specifics about what is
not to the point where it becomes nitpicking and frankly what I see as dishonesty. No, I think that the question is
what is dishonest about.
I feel like you're not listening and you're looking to just attack the principle and you're not going to accept any answer. You can always say that's not clear enough for me. It's clear enough for the millions of people that have lived in this country and clearly saw a distinction between whites and other people and made laws around naturalization. Laws were made around segregation. Laws were made to destroy segregation. I mean, this is the idea that this is not an important distinction. Racial categories in the United States, I find that just like, look at history. It's an absurd premise that you're making, and you're asking me to justify it for every. It's like, come on, dude.
But but the reasoning with that you just gave is just because something was historically valid, I mean, that doesn't make it valid now.
Yeah, it does. Sure, it does. Why not? Why do you mean? Why does it make it valid? Why is it invalid now? Show me why it's invalid.
PSA,
historically, it was. We're talking about social ideas, right?
Okay.
So historically, socially, this is a very important thing. Why is it not important now? And it is obviously important now because you have people attacking whites on the grounds of white privilege. You have all kinds of legislation saying whites can't freely associate amongst themselves. You have all kinds of things that say you have to move this person into white areas. Go ask an SJW why they attack white people specifically. I mean,
and I think
the
they're
idea
wrong.
that this
I don't
is
agree
not
with any of
an
that.
important category, but it's obviously important
to them,
right?
It's important to them,
and it's important to a lot of people. It's like, why you're the outlier here, pal. You're the one that's weird. You're the one you don't value this thing. You think, and I frankly, I don't even believe you. I think you're just being just like nitpicking. Like, I think you got to justify your position of not valuing it because it's an obviously important category historically, culturally, going back, a long ways, and it's important now. Why is it that 95% of people that vote Republican Party are white? You think that's not an important piece of information? You think that reveals something?
Well, in terms of that specific, I guess because you could, point at the Southern strategy and that there's been specific.
Oh yeah, why was the Southern strategy something that was done? Did you go ask Richard Nixon, hey,
people,
why are you doing this?
I'm not saying that people don't value skin color because people obviously
more
do.
than skin color.
I'm not saying people don't value skin color or race. I'm asking you why you value it, and that's all.
I answer that question because it's my history, it's my heritage, it's my people. What more do you want from me?
Just to frame the discussion and scientific facts here for you, PSA, when we do a scanning of genes of people and we just ask them, what race do you consider you are? They say black or white, and we find that the genetics correlates, that we can use the genes to detect whatever they will identify as. And this goes to levels of precision that are more than 99% precise. That's including the people who try to troll the scientists, the people who lie, and the people who are not sure. So there is a genetic correlate to race. That's not contestable. It's a fact of science. And then when we look at these people and how they behave in society, they behave differently. You look at how they vote differently. You look at the amount of crime they commit different amounts of crime. You look at the pumping of social welfare resources that they do, they differ on that too. And you look at their achievement in education, they differ on that too. Do you deny these facts?
Well, I don't deny, I don't know, because I don't know the specific information, but I do have a question about what you just said, which is there more genetic diversity between cultures that share the same race but are, different ethnicities than there are necessarily?
Are we really doing this again? I mean, do we have to do this shit every fucking time?
I don't even understand.
Come on, man.
I will explain to PSA.
I agree.
Yeah, tell him why he's fucking wrong, and let's move on.
Yes, tell me why I'm wrong.
We can move on
That's
from
the
this
question.
subject.
We will
JF
answer
is
this
one that
question.
steered the conversation.
The question you brought is the Lewontin fallacy. So caring about the amount of variance is not what we're talking about. Two people who are white are closer together genetically. That's the truth. We're not talking about variance. You got fooled on this question by an old scientist, Lewontin, who once wanted to blur the question of race, and he said, let's put the word variance in there and let's measure the variance. Let me explain to you how it doesn't make sense. Do you recognize the difference between cars and pickup trucks?
Sure.
And do you
What is it
recognize that there are many sorts of cars? They vary a lot, right? But the difference between a car and a pickup truck is always the same. So there's more variance within cars than there are between cars and pickup trucks. Yet we all distinguish between a car and a pickup truck. It's the same thing for race.
Well, I don't understand. That's what I just asked you. I said, is there more variance between race genetically than there is ethnicity? That's what I literally just asked you.
To break it down as simply as possible, I think you'll see greater differences inside groups than between groups, but denying the differences between groups is silly.
Yeah,
Look, I mean,
before we move on,
when people, like through all of history, when people didn't know anything about genetics and people grouped into genetically similar groups anyway, were they like committing an error?
Sure. Do you think that it's good to base society around just what people emotionally feel without based on logic or facts?
It's not going to be any different. Like first, I mean, both of those things come into play. Why shouldn't people base society around those that they feel comfortable with? I mean, it's a fact that, look, we find that there's research that shows that even within race, even within ethnic groups, people form groups of friends with people that are more genetically similar to them. You will find people, and you can do genetic testing on groups of friends, and you'll find that even those people are more genetically similar to each other than they are to even others of their same race or ethnicity. So, like, this is an observed human behavior, okay? And humans do not always act on logic. I know that maybe this bothers you, or you think that this is maybe you should just give up on the human species, because not every decision is based on some kind of logical deductive thing.
Well, it sounds like you're the one giving up because you want to say, well, I just want to do this based on how I feel. It doesn't have to be
because
based
the
on
thing
logic.
is, I don't see human feelings as fundamentally invalid. Like, where is your premise coming from?
Because
that it's some sort of error.
Because
to
feelings can be
based on
easily.
feelings. Have you ever wanted to fuck an Asian girl? Was that based on a feeling? Was that logical?
Because I believe that when it comes to something important like
what's the basis of that? Wait, hold on. What's the basis of that belief? What is the basis of that belief? Why do you believe that? Where does that come from?
Because I believe it's safer.
Why do you believe it?
I'll tell you. It actually relates to what we were talking about before the stream, where I believe entirely in free speech, in that you and Spencer should not be in trouble for the rally at all.
I appreciate that.
I think that you're totally justified in doing that. But the reason I believe that is because even if I disagree with you, I'm looking at it from a completely logically consistent perspective, that everyone gets the same free speech rights. But if I look at it emotionally, I can say, like the SJWs, oh, I disagree with what you're saying, so I don't think you should be allowed to speak. And that's why I view judging society, basing society around emotions as dangerous.
You're making a false dichotomy here
Yeah, I
between
just
the
don't
emotional
think it-
domain and the logical domain. Do you recognize that the founding fathers, when they wrote the First Amendment or when they wrote the Constitution, they had feelings driving them? It doesn't mean that these feelings do not have some logical explanation that you can then make about.
Given that humans
slogans.
operate based on feelings some of the time, do you think you're going to ever have a race of humanity where people are just purely logical?
No, I'm not saying that
Okay,
we should
so
all
wouldn't it be
ascribe to
logical?
Vulcans or
Wouldn't it be
be
logical to
emotionless.
develop policy around feelings?
Not necessarily.
Why not?
Slavery was based around feelings. And I
So
don't think
a
that
bad policy was based around feelings, so it's impossible for a good policy to be based around a feeling?
No.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question real
Oh.
quick. Do you smoke cigarettes?
Who me?
You, yeah.
No,
PSA.
I don't smoke cigarettes.
How many of your friends smoke cigarettes? How many people that you
two.
hang out with on a regular basis smoke cigarettes?
2 that I can think of.
And how many friends do you have?
How many? I have so many friends. I have the most.
No, I mean, do you
friends.
hang out with a big group of people? Like, how many of your people that you know do smoke cigarettes? Just 2?
Yes. And
Now, that's because people like to hang around people that are like them, right? You'll
Right.
see smokers hang out with smokers. You'll see.
That's not the same with everyone, though.
But in plurality, speaking in pluralities, people like to hang out and be with people who are like them.
Some people do.
Most people do. And up until very
Well, that's your
recently, as in
opinion.
a human society, we've kind of stuck around the people that are similar to us.
Right. So, but wait a minute. I'm not saying that we should be forcing diversity quotas on anyone. I don't agree with any of that. But there's a difference between saying people have the right to associate with who they want and saying, well, we're going to change the way the country is right now, currently, and we're going to start pushing people out of it. That's a very different thing.
The country was already changed, okay? The country was a white country, and then it was changed. Was that an illogical decision?
It was changed naturally over time.
No, it was not changed naturally. It was changed through a change in policy. The government literally changed the immigration policy, and that began to change the demographics of the country, and we are seeing the results of that now. Was that a logical decision for them to do?
I
It has
have no
created
idea.
more
I don't know what
conflict.
the
It's created
specifics-
more conflict, hasn't it? There's more racial conflict now than there was before.
It was
think
an
it-
emergent property, though. Nobody made that decision.
Yeah. And I think there's more conflict now. I mean, I agree that there's more racial conflict
Okay,
now.
so
'cause
was
of
it? But
SJW
was
stuff.
it? Was it
But that has
logical?
nothing
Was
to
it
do with more
logical?
diversity.
If you have a country that is a supermajority of one race, is it logical to change the policy to make it to drive that race into a minority? Is that a logical decision?
It depends if you look at your race as an important factor, which I
Well, yeah,
guess
they
other
did.
people
They
don't.
obviously did.
Okay, well, I don't.
Clearly, race has been the idea that if you look at it this way, people have looked at it that way. It has been that way historically.
Sure, some people have.
Is it logical, given the fact that people have looked at race as a very important category historically, to suddenly come in and say nobody should look at this as important anymore and nobody should base policy around this idea anymore? Is that logical?
It's not a universal thing. It's if you view.
Wait,
race
so
as
that's not the
important-
question. The question is
It
it
was.
logical? Is it logical to abandon a clear behavioral characteristic of humans when making policy? Is it logical to just say these people should not behave like this, so I will base policy around the assumption that they won't?
Sure, it's natural for someone to come up and kill you if they have a disagreement with you and be aggressive, and that's not legal. So I don't think that's a good basis either for laws. Just because something's
I
natural.
don't think you're answering the question.
Well,
Braving
as
women.
I tried to. Your question is, is it logical? And I'm saying, if you value race, then no, it's not logical. But if you don't value race, then it doesn't. Then it is logical. It doesn't matter.
So you wait. The thing is, white people are not the only people that value race here.
Sure.
So okay, the Mexican immigration
Mike, can I ask you a question?
activists for Mexican. There's one second. Activists for Mexican immigration are behaving based on the value of their race. Would you agree?
Some of them, yeah, definitely.
Are they being illogical? Should they be stopped because of that?
Yeah, I don't agree with any of that.
Okay.
Do you think that the argument that you're making is like blacks cluster together? Don't you think blacks cluster together more because they're a minority, because they're 15% of the population? Like, I think a lot of the problems that whites have is the fact that immigration policy has kind of gotten out of control, and whites are in danger of losing their majority status. Yeah, and I fully understand that. I mean, if I was a black that was going to school, and there's 5 black kids going to the school, and the rest of the school is predominantly white, I am going to be more attracted to hang out with my own kind. But the whites have the luxury of a situation where they, everyone's white. So they start breaking down into these subgroups, like you call it, the jocks and the goths. And I mean, you're talking about history. I mean, historically, they find these tribes, and their tribes are genetically identical, but they separate themselves by wearing all kinds of different outfits and whatnot. People separate themselves into groups and clans and whatever kind of, subculture, as you want to call it, themselves. So, but I think the blacks are clustering together for more of that reason. And if they were greater in number, I think you'd see more what you see in whites, where there are some whites that are just more prone to openness to new experience, more multicultural, as
okay. Well, we see a place where there's supermajority blacks, and they separate into different kinds of groups.
Yeah,
and it's genocide, AIDS, blood, like constant, just like poverty.
Well, I would argue that that's the institutional problems that we have. I mean, we're lucky to live in the United States, where we have,
well, why does the United States
law enforcement?
Why does the United States have these things and Africa doesn't?
Because over time, those institutions got hold here. We're lucky to have inherited them. Well, I know that. I'm trying not to make this a genetic argument, because I know that you want to make it a genetic argument. And
if it's a valid argument, why not make it?
Well, you already said that's boring as hell, and I already told you about the 3 different levels. You want to argue on the level of genes, you want to argue on the level of personality types, or do you want to argue on the level of...
I want to talk about the real fucking world. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this autism. This is why Spencer got frustrated in his thing too. I am so fucking sick of this deconstructionist fucking autistic what if on this like astral plane of pure thought, where like I exist because
do you think
I'm not accusing you. I'm not accusing you.
I know. I'm trying to keep it
I'm
sane.
saying I would like to talk about politics. I would like to talk about real world politics, real world policies, things that are going on in the world today. And frankly, look, I feel like all the questions that PSA has been putting forward have been answered to death. I feel like this has been done to death. I feel like it is nothing but the most boring thing, and it has been done and done and done and done. I would like to talk about some. Let's talk about something important.
Let's
talk about something important.
Yeah. Sorry. All right. Cool. So now that you guys got that all out of the way. Sorry, my camera was lagging the stream a little bit.